suffering a stroke. It is, of course, a long and difficult process that takes very hard work and perseverance. But now doctors are using computers and even video games to help in rehabilitation. Channel 2's Health and Science editor Earl Ubell reports on the new high-tech therapy.
Slowly and painfully, Beverly Edwards tries to regain the use of her right hand, paralyzed after a stroke.
My hands at the beginning couldn't do anything on their own.
But now she has a new computer and video system to help her brain, nerves, and muscle reactivate that immobile hand. Wires attached to the muscles of her arm lead into the computer. On the video, she sees the line rising as she opens her hand, falling as she closes it. The basic idea is that as soon as a muscle moves, there is feedback to the eye, and then the brain can immediately correct what has gone wrong. And in this way, learning takes place very, very quickly.
It's great. I can see what's happening, so I know what. If I do something wrong, I know next time around I can correct it right away.
This lets us see events that we wouldn't otherwise have access to.
Dr. Gianutsos and his colleagues have programmed video games that respond to muscle stimulation. Beverly is trying to keep the car on track. Then I got wired up and I tried it. By slight changes in my wrist, I can keep the car on the track. But that's easy for me because I don't have any brain damage and I don't have any muscle damage. Imagine what it's like for somebody who's paralyzed. Beverly also plays a kind of racquetball. The paddle at the bottom moves left or right depending upon whether she opens or closes her hand. This game motivates her to use her hand long after she would have tired. Freda Rich, also a stroke victim, tries her hand at basketball. And it has helped her.
Good. Hey, I got one.
Like over it? No? Okay.
Video games do not cure paralysis, but they help the patient regain as much movement as possible, as quickly as possible. The games do so by motivating the patient to stick with the exercise. It's the same principle used in attracting and keeping the interest of arcade video game players. Now, the rehabilitation video is available only at the Rehabilitation Institute.
Thank you. Dr. Max Gomez reports.
Some people have called them modern-day pool halls, where kids while away their hours and maybe even get into trouble. Well, that may be a bit of an overreaction, because like anything else, video games do have a bad side, but they also have a good side.
In this game, Patty, you're going to have to control two muscle groups. The ones on top of your wrist, which bring your wrist up, and the ones on the bottom, which bring your wrist down.
Here at the Institute for Rehabilitation Medicine, video games take on a slightly different look. There's still the goal of trying to hit a ball with a movable paddle, but the controller moving the paddle is not a joystick, but electrodes stuck to the skin.
Any deficit that is related to lack of motor control in following brain damage. This would be due to a head trauma, due to an anterior venous malformation, due to a stroke, due to encephalitis, cerebral palsy condition.
It's really a form of biofeedback therapy. A stroke patient needs to learn how to use the undamaged parts of her brain to perform tasks that were once second nature. Here, the electrodes pick up the electrical activity from muscles that contract and relax under the skin. It's actually the difference in activity between the two muscle groups that controls the game action.
Just make the motion come from your wrist. That's it. Now relax a little so that the car goes on the line. That's it. Beautiful.
It makes it seem a little more like something that's fun to do rather than just a chore or something that you have to do. So it gives it a little more interest, I think.
You feel like you want to do so much with your hands and nothing, happens or anything, but you just keep on going.
Now, just in case you think these games are easy or trivial, take it from me, they're not. I tried my hand at learning a couple of these and had a tough time. Rehabilitation patients spend an hour a day, 5 days a week, sometimes for months, slowly trying to regain the use of their limbs. The games make it less boring and tedious, but no less difficult. Determination may be the biggest variable in the successful rehabilitation of a brain-injured person. You gonna win?
I'm going to win.
At the NYU Medical Center, Max Gomez, Channel 5 News.
7:52. It often takes a tragedy or a near tragedy to get our attention, and so it was here at Good Morning America. One of our favorite people, cameraman Robin Still, suffered a stroke last summer. And in the months since, we've all learned about a very special place where disabled people get the kind of help that goes far beyond the bounds of ordinary medicine. As Steve Fox reports, it's a place where miracles happen.
Let me introduce you to a few people. Max Trotz, an Argentine polo player who was trampled by horses. It caused brain damage and loss of most motor abilities.
1, 2, 3, push. Good.
William Ellish, he's a stroke victim who's relearning how to get in and out of a car.
I like that.
This is Lee Saltzman. Diabetes and poor circulation caused her to lose her right leg.
I think when one comes here first, well, I now speak for myself, one does not feel like a whole person.
These people are all patients at the Rusk Institute of Rehabilitation Medicine at New York University here in Manhattan. Modern rehabilitation medicine was more or less founded here in the late 1940s through the pioneering efforts of Dr. Howard Rusk. Since then, more than 60,000 disabled adults and children have been treated here at the Institute, and many of them have emerged well enough to resume productive lives.
It's up to them. The opportunity's there, but they have to take it by the horns and run with it.
Over the course of almost 40 years, Dr. Howard Rusk built this institute based on some very astute principles. One of them is that action absorbs anxiety. It means the harder you work, the less you worry about your disability. And when you stop worrying, you can start getting well.
I personally believe there is not a single disabled person who does not have some behavioral problem, mostly centering around anxiety.
Good for you, Derek. Good for you.
At Rusk, therapy often involves an element of play. For example, Derek Hawkins, a young quadriplegic, is learning how to turn his arm muscles on and off by having them electronically linked to a game of Pong. He wins the game if he can regain control over his muscles. 16-year-old Anthony Recchia has trouble with his balance, so a video game like Target tells him when he's standing properly.
So steady, don't we move here?
The Rusk Institute pioneered the philosophy of treating the whole person, realizing that someone who's lost a limb or had a stroke has needs that go beyond ordinary medicine. Abby Kane is a former Rusk patient. In 1977, a bicycle accident left the lower part of her body paralyzed. At Rusk, she learned how to make the part that still worked do everything.
The optimism and the hope weren't so much that you're going to recover from this and you're going to be the way you were before, but that I was going to be able to live the kind of life I wanted to live with the restriction that I wasn't going to be able to walk.
Today, Abby is happily married and 5 months pregnant. When she wants to go someplace, she gets in her special car and drives. That, it seems, is what they all want, to come and go without being a burden to someone else. And sometimes, if they're lucky, to walk out of the Institute on their own 2 feet. Sometimes this is more than just success. Sometimes it amounts to a medical miracle, pulled off by patients who try and medical people who care.
Give you a lot of heart, a lot of love. To be surprised what it means. And give you love.
A wonderful program, and hurry back, Robin. We miss you.
Physical therapy plays an important role in helping the handicapped to overcome their disabilities. It means long hours of hard and unrewarding work sometimes, at least it used to. Here's Christy Whitker.
Okay, lift the fingers out. Lift them out. Hard, hard, hard. That's good.
Good. Keep it up there. Keep it up there. Terrific.
Playing what looks like a simple video game is not so easy for Freda Rich, a former Manhattan buyer who has been paralyzed on her left side since suffering a cerebral hemorrhage 8 months ago. But through these special video games developed by the staff at NYU's Institute of Rehabilitation Medicine, Freda is now learning to use her arm again. The game is activated by electrodes attached to her paralyzed arm, which convert minute muscle movements into electrical impulses that register on a screen.
The strategy that we employ involves monitoring the two main muscles which control opening and closing of the hand. The blue line represented the muscle which primarily closes the hand, and the red one that which primarily opens it. The strategy involves having them raise the red line, which represents the muscle for opening, while simultaneously keeping its opponent to a minimum.
Dr. Gianutsos says the games encourage patients to keep trying because when they move a muscle correctly, they immediately see the positive results.
Visually, it shows me what my muscles are doing. I just can't tell you what a major breakthrough this has been for me. My arm is coming alive, and I can't tell you how important it is to have an arm.
26-year-old Beverly Edwards, paralyzed on her right side by a stroke 2 years ago, says she's improved enormously after 2 months playing the games.
I can tie my shoes, which I couldn't do before. This week alone, I can pick up in the kitchen the cups. I know that now it's paying off, all the hard work.
Doctors say the games are a boon to the pediatric ward where they motivate kids to continue their therapy. In fact, many of them have to be pried away from the machines. 14-year-old Christos Karolis, paralyzed in a diving accident last summer in Greece, is mastering a basketball game, and in the process, he's regaining much of the use of his hands. Doctors here say for young and old patients, these video games are turning boring therapeutic activities into enjoyable and motivating fun, and they plan to develop many more such games in the future. In Manhattan, Christy Whitker, Independent Network News.
Is Eyewitness News with Roger Grimsby, Bill Butel, plus Spencer Christian, Storm Field, and the Eyewitness News team.
Rare used to be the only thing available, but now doctors say they've made a breakthrough in treatment of Lou Gehrig's disease. We'll have that story.
Physicians using games as a form of physical therapy.
At NYU Medical Center, a new kind of physical therapy, Gloria Rojas tells us about the program that involves computers and video games.
Beverly Edwards used to enter data on computers, but now this young stroke victim is using the computer to help her regain the use of her right hand. The muscles in the arm that control the hand are wired up, and today she worked with graphs and games.
Your muscle is like a joystick, and when it's totally relaxed, the basket will be on the left, and when it's totally tense, the basket will be on the right. And you're to place it under the ball and catch it.
Beverly comes to the Rehabilitation Institute 5 days a week. While she was playing a game today, the stakes are so very high. Beverly wants to regain some function in her right hand.
At the moment, it could pick up large objects. I don't expect it to come back like the left because I know it may not. So I'm not expecting too much on that part, but I do expect it to pick up some things. And it will.
The use of computer games has been developed by a team of researchers at the Institute. They're using it for stroke and accident victims, including children.
Kids enjoy doing it and will do not have to be badgered to carry out their exercise, which to me is great.
I mean, they don't get bored, they don't get tired?
They don't get bored. The parent will show up to pick them up and they'll want to continue, and then you'll eventually have to say, listen, this is absolutely the last game and you're going to go after this, which I find is quite rewarding.
The computer brings something brand new to rehabilitation medicine at the New York University Medical Center. But the computer in no way replaces conventional therapy, and it certainly doesn't replace the therapist. According to Dr. Gianutsos, the therapist, as well as the patient, is helped.
You've got to be on your toes. You've got to be able to interpret what's going on the screen and guide the patient through it. And you'll never replace the therapist with this.
Just how challenging a computer game can be in this situation was demonstrated to me today. I've always wanted to raise one eyebrow haughtily, never been able to control the muscle. With the electrodes in place, I tried to isolate and control that muscle and found it very difficult.
Is this what Beverly went through?
Yes. At the very beginning, this is what she had to contend with.
My eyebrow experiment made me better understand what accident and stroke victims must feel, but of course the results were purely frivolous. However, the computer may have some important results in rehabilitation, sports medicine, and common things like cramps and spasms.
From WNBC TV, this is News 4 New York with Ralph Penza and Anna Bond.
There are those who believe video games are detrimental to children, to their health, and to their education. Not so, and not necessarily so, says one doctor who showed Al Roker how to use those video games constructively.
This is John Smythe. He's working with a biofeedback therapist to regain the use of his limbs. You see, John was paralyzed last July from the neck down in a diving accident. Today, at the NYU Center for Rehabilitation Medicine, he's monitoring the electrical impulses from the muscles in his arm by watching them on this monitor. This kind of therapy, though, can get pretty old pretty fast. So with a modification of the program that runs the biofeedback computer, suddenly, John is playing a game of video pong. By flexing and relaxing his muscles, he moves the paddle back and forth. Today, John had his first day, and he's pleased.
Just tried that for the first time today, and I enjoyed that a lot. And it's hard, but it seems to be helping a lot. I can feel the muscles pulling and tightening up, so I can tell it's really working.
And the video game's effects may go beyond the physical therapy.
It makes these video games accessible to a disabled population, and now they can relate to their non-disabled peers and talk about video games and playing video games, whereas maybe they're not as likely to under other circumstances.
Anytime you can sugarcoat medicine, it sure can't hurt. And this sort of therapy has got to be doing wonders. And who knows? Someday, Donkey Kong may have an MD after his name. I'm Al Roker, News 4, Manhattan.
Al tells us that Dr. Gianutsos is now working on a version of the popular Space Invaders game to help his patients along.
Rehabilitative therapy like this is necessary for stroke victims or others who suffer some degree of paralysis. But it is slow going.
If your hand gets tired, take a break. I'm going to let you work on your own, okay?
Getting handicapped patients to maintain the proper level of therapy is often difficult for doctors because rehabilitation can be painful, grueling, even downright boring. So a novel program at New York University Medical Center is trying a new tack to keep the patients interested and to make the process more fun. They've brought video games into the hospital. Freda Rich comes to the center daily for 1 hour of this special therapy. She was partially paralyzed following a stroke brought on by a congenital defect. Her arm, which once had no feeling, is slowly responding now. To begin, electrodes are placed over the muscles which open and close the hand.
It's the extensor digitorum communis and the flexor muscle. The extensor digitorum communis controls the metacarpal phalangeal joint, the extension movement around this joint.
Next, the therapist punches up a computerized program which suits each patient's needs.
The red line represents the muscle in here which opens your hand, and the blue line represents the one which closes your hand. And since we're training you on opening your hand, you want to maximize the height of the red line while keeping the blue one as low as you can. And whenever the red line reaches that green go line on the screen, the tone will go off. That's your goal for today. The idea of embedding the therapy within a recreational context makes intuitive sense. Patients do work for much longer periods of time without taking a break, and will engage in the exercise much longer and without complaint. My staff keeps coming back to me and telling me that it makes them better therapists because it immediately informs them about the firing rate of a muscle and what happened. And you see it right out there in front of you. Just as it's obvious when you're failing, it's immediately obvious when you're succeeding. So the computer makes all of this possible. You couldn't do this in the past. You would rely on meters and flashing lights and things like that, and they don't give you the same amount of information. And for a brain-damaged individual, that's particularly important.
Visually seeing both lines together, trying to separate them helps me much more than putting tiles on a piece of trivet. I can visualize the screen in my mind, so when I go home and I lift my fingers, I can really see if my blue line is coming up or my red line is coming up.
In this game, the patient tries to keep the car on the track by opening and closing the hand. The games all have a built-in gradient geared to the patient's ability. They also incorporate certain fundamental therapeutic principles.
This will give you exercise in opening and closing your hand, which is a useful one, as you know. There is one game, for example, it involves catching a ball by moving a basket under the falling ball. And when if you had a spinal cord injured patient who didn't have good control of a muscle, but could turn it on and off somewhat, the game is geared to monitor only that muscle and have the basket all the way to the left of the room when it's totally relaxed, and then when it's maximally tensed, move all the way to the right. And we can adjust how much tension it requires to move it all the way to the right. By learning to turn the muscle on and off at will, this is one of the basic requirements for regaining motor control.
Young patients have responded especially well to the games.
If you embed it in Space Invaders or in something like that, they like to do that a lot better. It also lets the child develop a sense of self-esteem. All their buddies are talking about their computer games and their computers, and now they can talk about it. They have something that they can discuss.
Dr. Gianutsos has focused his research on the upper extremities, since it is more difficult to regain control of them following a stroke. Work with the leg has been much easier, with better results. He sees this as a useful tool for the therapist, not a replacement, and he hopes to refine the system further.
I can monitor up to 16 muscles concurrently with the system, but if you try to present more than 2 or 3 to the patient at the same time, it's very confusing. And so right now we're working on improving the feedback and informational aspects of it. That's the next challenge that we'll face.
One of the biggest advantages over conventional therapy is speed. The delay in feedback during therapy sessions like this can pose problems.
One of the problems with that type of an approach is that oftentimes with a brain-damaged individual, there is a breakdown in information processing and in memory. And so even if they happen to hit upon the right combination early in therapy, by the time the therapist decides that, yes, that was right, and tells them they've forgotten what they've done. The advantage of using the video display is that it's there instantaneously. You see the motor response described in spatial and temporal variables there, and they immediately know when they did the thing correctly and when they didn't do it correctly. That's right, let it come down. Good.
In victims of paralyzing strokes and accidents. The experimental technique is called video feedback, and we'll hear about it from Dr. Joanna Shaw.
9 months ago, Albert Burks had a stroke. His right arm was paralyzed.
What you're going to be doing here, Mr. Burks, is you're going to be trying to lift your fingers straight up, okay? And you want to keep these muscles as relaxed as possible.
After 7 months of standard physical therapy, Burks has joined an experimental program.
We usually get people after everyone's given up on us. And they say, what are we going to do with this person? And there's an awful lot you can do.
Okay, very, very gently. Try to open the hand up. Very good.
The innovation is the use of the computer and television. Electrical impulses from Burke's muscles are picked up by electrodes and analyzed by computer. The results are instantaneously displayed on the television monitor.
The nice part about it is it's a real neat way of showing the patient, what's going on in their muscles, and hopefully by looking at what's happening, they'll be able to control the hand better.
I feel that it has helped me quite a bit. And they're doing a job. You know, it's getting better every day.
Video feedback has helped Burks use his arm and hand again. Saul Markoff is using a different video feedback technique to get his balance back after his stroke. The point of the platform is to learn how to shift your balance from side to side and from front to back. You need both of those skills in order to walk again. Again, you get feedback on how you're doing. The exercises can look like and be as much fun as a video game.
It's called The Road. The Road. Okay? What you're going to see is a car. That's the car.
Right.
And the car will be moving on a road. Your body will move the car. Just like it moved the blue square.
Okay. Yeah.
All right? The object is to stay within the road lane.
Inventor Gianutsos cautions that the computer is only as good as the people using it.
That's it.
This is not a panacea, that it's not a quick fix. It's a tool that in the hands of the properly trained therapist can really implement their therapeutic ability.
Dr. Joanna Shaw, Channel 5 News.
Mitch Cohen was hit by a car 2 years ago. Damage to his brain makes it difficult for him to speak clearly, walk, and hold his head upright. As part of his treatment, Mitch is using a special video game.
All set, Mitch? Yo.
It helps an undamaged part of his brain learn to control the muscles of his neck. It's based on a technique called biofeedback.
It's a therapy embedded within a recreational context. And in order to succeed in the game, you have to do your exercise, and you have to do it properly, or you don't win the game.
A transmitter inside this special headgear feeds a signal to a computer. That feedback shows up on a TV screen as a blue cube, and that in turn lets Mitch know the position of his head. By moving his head, Mitch controls the location of the cube. Playing the video game helps the undamaged part of Mitch's brain learn to control his head movements. When Mitch does his exercise correctly, the blue cube moves into the red rectangle, and he wins the game.
Very good. Excellent.
Biofeedback machines like this one act as a kind of sixth sense for the patient. It allows them to see and hear activities that are going on inside their bodies.
3, 2, 1, go.
Another biofeedback video game improves Mitch's balance and walking skills. As he shifts his weight on a pressure-sensitive platform, he guides a car along a race course. It may look easy, but Mitch is required to use considerable mental and physical concentration. As in any hard work, a pat on the back is appreciated.
You got 30 on that, 30 hits, that's fantastic. I think really what I'm doing is very modest in terms of what the technology is capable of doing. I think that we're just scratching the surface.
Medical researchers believe these new biofeedback methods hold promise for stroke patients as well as those who've suffered injury to their brains. As for Mitch, the biofeedback therapy is working. His neck muscles are stronger, and that makes it easier for him to hold his head upright. Only time will tell how close he will come to a complete recovery. This is David Lucas reporting.
It is definitely video, but this is not a game, and David Hurd is not bent on manipulating a joystick, but rather bending his arm. Confined to a wheelchair, David is learning to move his own muscles.
Bending it makes it go this way, and straightening it makes it go that way. There you go. Keep that car on the road.
For David, the road has been rocky.
I had my accident August 12, 1985. I was 17 years old. It was a diving accident out in Rockaway Beach.
An accident that severely injured David's spinal cord. Here at New York University's Rusk Institute, doctors have developed a program you might call video rehabilitation.
We start off with clients who have to think out every minute action that they perform, turning on a muscle, things that you and I take for granted.
Electrodes are attached to the patient's arm. The activity of the bicep is represented by the blue line, the tricep by the red. To learn how to straighten his arm, David must learn to control his muscles, keeping the red line on top, the blue below.
That's good.
may sound simple, but it is exhausting.
It's like no pain, no gain. But it hurts. It hurts afterwards. You go to sleep and you go upstairs.
Video rehab is controlled by computer. There are more than 20 different programs that get progressively more difficult to do. And there's a platform that patients stand on designed to detect the way they shift their weight.
And come all the way to the right. Come toward me.
This stroke victim is learning to regain her balance and her confidence.
See, when you're walking, you want to do the same thing. You want to make sure that you're putting that amount of weight on the leg and not making the left leg do all the work.
Some of the programs are not easy. For instance, docking a spaceship by shifting your weight can be tricky, even for someone with healthy muscles.
Just line up the edges.
Believe me, I'm trying. But the effort seems to pay off.
What it's done for me is great, because I couldn't do anything. I couldn't even turn my hand over when I came here.
And when making a muscle move is like moving a mountain, nothing beats racking up a good score. Gianutsos, CNN, New York.
He got, that's not bad for a first shot, actually. It's very...
Oh, Jim Jensen, Carol Martin, Dr. Frank Field, and the Channel 2 News team. This is Channel 2 News at 5. Everything you need to know, because anything can happen in New York.
Subject now, Parkinson's disease, a terrible nerve disorder that can incapacitate those that it strikes. But now, as we hear in our 5 o'clock Health Watch tonight, there is a surgical procedure that may help reduce its symptoms. Details from Health and Science editor Earl Ubell.
For 36 years as a maintenance worker, then foreman, William O'Donnell scrambled up and down the cables of the Queensboro Bridge. Then, 2.5 years ago,
I noticed on the Brooklyn Bridge, I couldn't really go to the cables to get up on the, I couldn't really go to the cables to get up on the cables. And a feeling of anxiety was coming over me.
Now 58 years old, O'Donnell has Parkinson's disease.
I have all the ramifications of Parkinson's except shaking and the vertical dyskinesis.
You have speech problem?
Speech, balance.
Next Thursday at New York University Medical Center, O'Donnell goes for a surgical brain transplant, an operation first done in Mexico 18 months ago. NYU brain surgeons will take a piece of his adrenal gland, it's in the abdomen, they will transplant it to his brain, where they hope it will secrete substances to overcome his Parkinson's disease. Dr. Abraham Lieberman is his Parkinson's expert.
I believe that this is a promising operation, particularly for people with advanced Parkinson's disease.
Because the operation is so new, the doctors must have some way of evaluating its effectiveness. Therefore, these tests. Dr. John Gianutsos is testing O'Donnell's strength and muscle control. He's also checking the patient's balance. After surgery, he'll check again. Yesterday, O'Donnell had his adrenals checked by CAT scan x-rays. Of the 4 cases already done by NYU, 1 stunned the doctors.
A year ago, couldn't walk, couldn't work, couldn't speak. Had the surgery, voice is loud, able to stand by himself, and able to walk short distances by himself.
You must have said, wow.
Yes, I did.
But O'Donnell, a poet, a former paratrooper, a sailor, has confidence that the surgery will work for him. With the 5 o'clock Health Watch, I'm Earl Ubell, Channel 2 News.
Oh, Jim Jensen, Carol Martin, Dr. Frank Field, and the Channel 2 News team. This is Channel 2 News at 5. Everything you need to know, because anything can happen in New York.
Parkinson's disease is a degenerative brain disorder. It can completely incapacitate its victims. But as we learn in our 5 o'clock Health Watch, doctors are experimenting with a new surgical technique which can repair a lot of the damage from Parkinson's. Our Health and Science editor, Earl Ubell, reports.
Shift your weight back and position the blue in the red frame. Good.
It's painful to watch a grown man out of control. At 58, William O'Donnell's brain has trouble telling his body what to do. He has Parkinson's disease. You have speech problem?
Speech, balance, everything.
It's a tough life.
It's too tough. Too tough for anybody. Nobody should have it.
Last Wednesday, O'Donnell lay on a table at New York University Medical Center. Surgeons tried to repair his crippled brain with a new and startling operation invented in Mexico. Doctors transplanted healthy tissue into his damaged brain.
Everyone feeling that we're on the cutting edge of science and trying to help people with a whole new approach. So we're all very excited about it.
O'Donnell's brain cannot make enough of a chemical called dopamine. The adrenal gland, right above the kidney, also creates dopamine, so the surgeons transplanted bits of adrenal to his brain. One team of doctors removed the adrenal gland from the abdomen. The other, headed by Dr. Ransohoff, burrowed through the brain looking for a section called the caudate nucleus. It lacks dopamine.
It's the only part of the procedure which takes a little bit of skill. And it's a little lonely going down till you find it. It's always there, but it's nice to see it when you get there.
The brain surgeon dug 4 inches into O'Donnell's brain. He found the caudate nucleus and an open space called the ventricle.
There we're into the ventricle now.
Meanwhile, other doctors cut the adrenal into tiny chips. Dr. Ransohoff snipped a hole in the caudate nucleus. He put the chips of the adrenal into the hole. Now all the pieces of the adrenal gland are in that hole in the brain. The next step is simply to cover up the hole partially and then sew up the brain.
No single part of it is particularly difficult. It's the coordination, which has taken us some time to work out.
Doctors here and in Mexico don't know exactly why this transplant works. So far, it has reduced symptoms in most of the 80 patients.
If this is successful, and it certainly appears that it's going to have a degree of success, it's going to open the whole field of restoring brain function in other areas as well as Parkinson's.
While he was being tested before surgery, O'Donnell pinned his hopes on the transplant as spelling the difference between living or just being alive. With today's 5 o'clock Health Watch, I'm Earl U. Bell, Channel 2 News.